It's time!
Oh, right on the chin.
Mamma mia! What a knee!
You cannot stand in front of that man. That power is different. It's extraordinary.
And another opponent!
Whoa!
What a head kick! It's all over! A spectacular finish, just like that! Headshot, bang! Done!
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Fight Corner. Today we're going to be taking a look back at last night's fight card, UFC 297 from Toronto, Canada, Strickland versus Duplessis. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it. Starting as we always do on the prelim card, we had Malcolm Gordon versus Jimmy Flick kicking this one off. Gordon came out really fast and really strong in that first round, smothering Flick with a bunch of punches and constant pressure before landing a really solid takedown right into side control. Flick was able to regain his guard and shoot up a triangle attempt. It was locked in, but it was pretty loose. There was a lot of space there. He didn't really cut an angle, so it wasn't really any kind of a threat to Gordon, who was able to get out. Gordon did look up to lock up a guillotine choke, but Flick was able to reverse that position. He ended up on top with Gordon still trying to hold on to that guillotine. So Flick was able to sink in the start of a Von Flue choke. It looked like it was really in there, but the round ended, so couldn't really get the finish with that. Round two started off pretty much the exact same as the first. Gordon coming out with a lot of pressure, backing Flick up against the cage. But Gordon got a bit overexcited. Flick was able to slip off to the side, take Gordon's back, and then eventually transition into a really tight arm triangle and get the tap, immediately crushing all hopes for the Canadian parlays on this card. It's one of the reasons why I kind of went against doing that. I just didn't have a good feeling about this one. It wasn't going to be like the Vancouver card when all the Canadians went 8-0. Just kind of had that feeling. Jasmine Jasdavicius took on Priscilla Cachoeira in, I guess you'd call a catchweight bout, but they just moved up from 125 to 135. Cachoeira came out strong in the first round, but just like Gordon in the previous fight, she got a bit overexcited, charged forward with a bit of reckless abandon, and gave Jasdavicius an easy double leg takedown, which she took full advantage of, eventually securing the back and then transitioning to mount, landing a lot of strikes, nothing too powerful, but the volume was intense and non-stop, really putting that pressure on Cachoeira early on in the fight. The second round, great start for the round by Jasdavicius. Straight right, knocked Cachoeira down, and she was never able to get back to her feet. Jasdavicius beat her badly on the ground in this round. Elbows and punches, and these had much more steam on them than they did in the first round. Pretty brutal round for Cachoeira and a great round for Jasdavicius. Clear 10-8 in anyone's mind. I don't know how you could ever disagree with that. Clearly total domination from start to finish there. Third round, Cachoeira had a little bit of a bright start, landing some good strikes on the feet and stuffing a takedown attempt, but she was eventually taken down and ended up right in a crucifix, and Jasdavicius continued to pound away on Cachoeira before eventually sticking in the anaconda choke. It was really looked more like a neck crank or anything like that. Her hands weren't quite connected around the bicep. It was just kind of fingertips, to be perfectly honest. But I mean, that tap most likely just came from exhaustion and just the amount of punishment that Cachoeira had taken in the previous two rounds and in the start of this round as well. And Jasdavicius, she set a new record for strike differential. I believe it was just in the women's divisions, though I'm not too sure. I'll have to go back and look and see if this is across the board for the organization. But it was something like 350 strikes to 22, which is absolute insanity, to be perfectly honest. Next on the card, we had Johan Linus versus Sam Patterson. A really quick one for this. A little bit of back and forth on the feet to start the round. Linus landed a good counter right off Patterson's jab, but Patterson was eventually able to get the fight up against the cage, locked up a front headlock, dragged Linus to the ground, took the back beautifully, sunk in a rear naked choke, and got the tap. Submission, again, rear naked choke, round 1, 2 minutes and 3 seconds. Pretty easy win for Patterson. And he did say he's going to be staying at the welterweight division. So it will be kind of interesting to see how the UFC matches him up in the future. Could be another bright up-and-coming prospect from the UK, which, you know, the UFC never turns their nose up at. Moving on down the prelims, we had Jillian Robertson versus Polyana Viana. Jillian was able to get this fight to the ground real early with a single leg that was not defended at all by Viana. Not much damage landed on the ground, but Robertson had great control there, moving to mount and almost secured an arm triangle before transitioning to the back and coming very close to an armbar. But Viana defended really well, stacking Jillian, not letting her get that extension onto the arm, and was able to end the round back on the feet. Round 2 started off basically the same as round 1. Viana had a bit more success on the feet at the beginning, but as she was punching going backwards, she opened herself up to another takedown when Robertson got a single leg. And again, there was just no defense from Viana whatsoever. Robertson moved to the mount and continued to land punches and elbows, causing Viana to just cover up, and the ref stops the fight. Robertson is only one finish away now from tying Amanda Nunes for the most finishes in women's MMA. She's second right now, tied alongside Jessica Andrade with 9 finishes, 7 of those subs and 2 of those TKOs. Nunes obviously sitting at 10. It'll be interesting to see if Jillian will be able to catch and even surpass Nunes, potentially even this year. Next up, we had a rematch from Dana White's Contender Series, Series City versus Ramon Tavares. What a great fight. I mean, you can't really ask for much more than this. It was a great first round by Tavares. He landed some good shots to the body, dropping City briefly. Both exchanged strikes throughout the round, but Tavares seemed to land the better shots and ended the round with some great strikes, rocking City a bit just before the bell, and really taking some momentum into the second round. But the second round was a complete turnaround for City. He really kept that pressure on Tavares, after getting dropped in that same round and getting his nose smashed. He didn't give Tavares any room to breathe and just kept coming. And that third round looked to be a real banger when it was coming out, and it really did not disappoint at all. So much pressure from City, constantly backing up Tavares, but Tavares was able to land some good counters, and Tavares definitely inflicted a lot more damage, cutting Sydney on the nose and under the eye. I do think that City probably should have gotten the nod by the judges, but that damage just loomed too large in their minds, I feel. Just that amount of blood that was coming out from his face, and Tavares had some damage on his face, but it was nowhere near the amount that was showing on City, who was throwing and landing more, but Tavares' shots were just much more damaging. And again, that's probably what had the judges leaning towards giving Tavares the decision there. Split 29-28 times 2, and then one dissenting judge going 29-28 for City on that one. Next up, we had Charles Jourdain and Sean Woodson. This was one of the fights that I had highlighted that I was looking forward to in my preview show. I possibly could have had a bit more to it, but it was still a really good fight. Both kind of feeling each other out in the first round. It was surprising to see Jourdain fight the majority, or all of the first round, I should say, from the outside. But Woodson's defense was really good. He rolled with a lot of the shots Jourdain threw at him, defended a takedown really well at the end of the round as well. Start of the second, Jourdain still fighting in Woodson's range on the outside. And again, it might be that he's just worried about closing that distance due to the danger of Woodson's knees coming right up the middle. Woodson again was defending all of Jourdain's takedown attempts, and Woodson seems to be seeing everything Jourdain is throwing at him and being able to counter quite well and land his strikes first. Jourdain was still in it though. I mean, he wasn't out of this fight in any way. And round 3 was just kind of much more the same. I mean, even when Jourdain was able to close the distance and get in on Woodson's legs, he could not complete the takedown. He even had a double-legged lock double leg locked up under Woodson's hips, but just couldn't finish. Woodson did actually land a takedown of his own at the end of the round, which allowed Jourdain to lock up a guillotine, which did seem quite tight, to be perfectly honest. And Woodson was not fighting the hands at all, which is always a bit concerning when you see a fighter do that. But he was able to pop his head out, and I went to the judges' scorecard for decision. And again, this was a split decision, 29-28 times 2 for Woodson, and 29-28 by one judge for Jourdain. It was a bit weird, actually, at the end of this fight when Buffer was announcing the winner. Somehow it seemed like the crowd and Jourdain heard his name being called, and they were all celebrating. The crowd was going nuts, and Woodson seemed a bit dejected. But he was the one who got the win, rightful winner in the end. Close fight. But yeah, that was a bit of a weird experience there at the end of the fight, if anyone saw that. And on the feature prelim, we had Brad Katona and Garrett Armfield. Really good fight, this one. I really enjoyed watching this one. It was basically like both guys were almost mirrors of each other. It was really interesting to watch. Great first round for both landing good shots upstairs, and both setting up their hook attacks for later on in the fight, but each had slightly different ways they were going about it. Katona was using that body lock entry to kind of set up his left hook when lunging in, and Armfield was attacking to the body with his hook attacks to look at going upstairs later on in the fight. Katona finished the round in a strong position against the fence. Katona did land 2 low blows in that round. One of them was kind of waved off by Armfield, and he continued on. But that second one, I mean, you could hear that all around the arena, and it was pretty bad. Did get a hard warning from the ref that if it did happen again, he would get a point taken away. But luckily that didn't have any bearing on the fight going forward. Second round, again, both landing really good shots. And the stats have Armfield ahead by quite a large number at this point of significant strikes. Katona landing a takedown again at the end of the round, but not being able to hold Armfield down and do much of anything with it. He did land a good knee from the clinch against the cage. It was a very tough round to score. Both fairly even in my opinion, but if you're going by those stats, you know, you'd have Armfield kind of running away with the momentum going into the third. Katona landed a good left hook at the beginning of that third round and hit another really nice takedown. While Armfield did accept that takedown for a moment, he did scramble back up to his feet. And this was a much better round for Katona, landing good strikes. But Armfield was not out of it in this round, and he listened to his corner's advice, and he went for that takedown late in the round. Katona defended that well, and even looked like he was going to end up on top. But Armfield, using all of his athleticism, rolled through that, got back up to his feet. And yeah, really good fight by both these guys. I did lean myself to Armfield getting the decision at the end. I just thought his punches had a bit more steam on them, even though he was kind of looked like he was gassing at the end of that third round. And the judges went that way as well. Unanimous decision, 29-28 by all three judges in the favor of Garrett Armfield. And not a good start for the Canadian men so far on this card. Both women, though, having dominant fights and finishes. So that's a little bright spot for the Canadian fans on this one. Right, moving on to the main card. Opening fight, Arnold Allen versus Movsar Iavoyev. Great fight. I mean, not really much else to be expected from this. Allen came out very light on his feet in the first round, landed some good strikes to the body, and was able to defend the first takedown attempt by Iavoyev. But late in the round, Iavoyev was able to get to Allen's back with a very slick duck under off his own strike. Allen tried a few ground rolls to get Iavoyev off of him and get to a better position, but Iavoyev just followed him everywhere and just continuously mat returned Allen, which is super taxing. But I really wouldn't expect that to have too much of a drain on Allen. He's always in great shape. But yeah, very entertaining round. Round two, this was a really good round for Iavoyev, causing a deep cut and welt under the left eye of Allen with a well-placed right hook off a jab that stumbled Allen. And Iavoyev has all the momentum going into that final round. Round three, Allen came out doing much better, defending all the takedowns at the start of the round, landed some really good strikes. And Iavoyev shot for a takedown, and off of that, Allen was actually able to stuff that, get into a front headlock position, and you could hear his corner calling for the knees, and Allen obliged. And Iavoyev tried to be a grounded opponent by keeping his left hand on the ground, but it looked like Allen was lifting it before the strikes landed, but it was very close. And I really hate this rule, the grounded opponent rule. I mean, it should really be a grounded opponent is a grounded opponent. You're fully on the ground, your back or your stomach on the ground, not dragging your fingertips on the ground while you're hunched over. I mean, that's not a grounded opponent. But that is the rule that we are dealing with. So Mark Goddard stepped in and called a stop to the action and gave Allen a hard warning. Iavoyev was cut near the top of his head off of those knees. When the fight resumed, they both started landing really good strikes. But Iavoyev seemed to land the better quality strikes and sealed that judge's decision. I can't really help but think, though, that if those knees would have been deemed legal and the ref didn't step in, it could have really changed the outcome of the fight. But that's a big what if. And the fight goes to the decision, 29-28 on all three judges' scorecards. And you're probably going to see Iavoyev take on the winner of Volk and Topuria, unless that fight is a close decision. There's, calls for a rematch or has some kind of an anticlimactic ending, low blow, eye gouge, something like that. But I would expect Iavoyev to be in that number one contenders bracket coming up very soon for the next opponent for the flyweight belt. Chris Curtis, Marc-Andre Barriault. Bit of a weird one, this. It really didn't kind of go the way I think anyone thought it was going to. Barriault really didn't use any of that kind of forward pressure that we really know him for, and why he has the nickname the power bar, because he just goes and goes and goes. And the first round, there was just quite a bit of feeling out between the two, just constantly moving backwards, which is just very strange, looking to counter-strike the counter-striker, which is a bit odd, again, but obviously he just respects the counter-striking ability of Curtis. Curtis did start to find his range near the end of the round, and I did expect this to really start heating up in the second and going into the third. Bit more action in the second, but not really by much, and Barriault still just moving back, fighting off that back foot. He did land a few good shots, but it seems that Curtis is just putting more punches together, even though they're really only 2-punch combinations, sometimes a 3-punch combination. But yeah, it was still a bit odd going into this third and final round. And in my opinion, it's a bit of a tough round to score. I'm not really too sure about that. Third round, bit more of what we expected, but it was kind of to the later end of the round. Barriault had a great start to the round. Curtis started to pull away, though, near the end when they got really close together, landing good punches and elbows in close, and that likely sealed the judge's decision for him. And when it went to the cards, it was 30-27 times 2 for Curtis and 29-28 for the one judge for Marc-Andre Barriault. So again, another Canadian losing on the card, which is, again, very disappointing for those MMA crazy fans up there in the Great White North. Now, moving on to a fight that was on a lot of people's list for ones to watch, especially with a potential up-and-coming contender, Mike Malott, in the welterweight division, taking on Neil Magny. And this fight started off, I think, how a lot of people thought it would, with Malott being strong on the attack, attacking that lead leg of Magny, just like Ian Gary did. And there was no checks coming from Magny whatsoever. He was just kind of eating those as they came. And they really did some damage to Magny. You could see he was limping a little bit, staying a bit light on it. Took a second to kind of bring his feet back into stance after taking some. So yeah, not a great start for Magny, but a real good one for Malott. And the second round was another strong one for Mike Malott, securing 2 takedowns on Magny, and he was able to transition, into side control and then right into mount, landing a few strikes, but nothing really damaging. Magny was doing a good job of hand fighting and controlling the wrists to not really allow Malott to get off any serious damage, but another really dominant round for the Canadian going into the third. And Malott carried that momentum right into the third round, getting another strong takedown and just controlled the action for most of the round. But when Magny got back to his feet and he got a big takedown of his own, really putting that pressure on Malott, who tried to scramble after taking some good shots from Magny by going for a leg attack. But, as many of us know, those kind of attacks can leave you very exposed, especially if you don't get a good bite on the submission very quickly, which Malott did not, and Magny took full advantage of this, moving from side control right into mount and started landing some shots after shots after shots and forcing the ref to step in and stop the fight at 4:45 of the third round. And just like that, all the Canadian men on the card lost, which is kind of crazy, to be honest. Malott wasn't even able to get up for the official decision, and this is a massive setback for him, and he'll need to go back to the gym and reassess what went wrong in this fight. I do think he just tried for the finish maybe a bit too hard, didn't pace himself, and when his back hit the canvas with Magny on top of him, it seemed he not necessarily broke, but I don't know what else you would call that. He just seemed to kind of not have any answers for what was going on when he had to be in a more defensive position. Great win for Neil Magny, especially coming off that loss to Ian Gary. And it'll be interesting to see what's next for Magny and also for Malott as well going forward. Next up, we're going to the co-main event, Raquel Pennington and Mayra Bueno Silva. Good first round for Bueno Silva, landing a few good calf kicks. Pennington did go for a few single legs, which I think was unadvised. Her best chance to win is using her boxing, as Silva most likely would have the grappling advantage, especially early on in the fight. And she did show that in round 1 by taking the back of Pennington and really controlling her easily to the end of the round. But Pennington switched that all around in the second with a really good round, really putting hands on Silva and clearly hurting her. But she ended up just closing that space too much and just ended up continuously going back into a clinch position, which did give Silva a chance to recover. And I think that if Pennington would have kept that space and distance, I do really think that she would have been able to get a finish in the second round on the feet. But she closed that space and she got taken down again, and her back was taken again in the second round. Moving on to the third, most of this round took place against the cage and the clinch, but both had their moments, landing good strikes. But Pennington took control at the end of the round, going for some chokes and ending the round on top in a very strong, dominant position. Round 4 was another round that was definitely in Pennington's favor. Silva had a chance to take this round when she took Pennington's back, but she prioritized submission over position when she got to Pennington's back and went for that rear naked choke without good control of the lower half of Pennington, which allowed her to turn into her and finish the round on top in a strong position, landing really good hard strikes from the top. And then moving on to the fifth, Pennington finished this fight really strong, and again probably could have had a finish in this round as well when she locked up that arm triangle choke, but she didn't move off to the side to get maximum pressure. I mean, you can finish that choke from the mount, but you still need to cut a bit of an angle, at least dropping your hip to the mat to kind of get that finish. I mean, you can finish it from top, just from a straight on position, but you need to have a crazy squeeze for that. Silva did survive that choke and was able to kind of retain a little bit of her guard, but she did nothing to try to get back to her feet after that, and just laid on her back with her hands behind her head while Pennington kicked her legs for the final bits of that round. And when it went to the judges' scorecards, it really wasn't that much of a surprise. It was 49-46 times 2, and one judge had it 49-45. I'm assuming giving that fifth round a 10-8, which, to be honest, is probably warranted, as Pennington dominated that. Easy win. Real big congratulations to Raquel Pennington. I know in my preview fight I said that, I'm really not that I'm not a fan of hers, but I've never really been that excited to see any of her fights. This was a really great fight, and I actually will be looking forward to seeing her take on Juliana Pena at some point this year. It wouldn't surprise me maybe if they even put that on the Abu Dhabi card as well for June. Would not surprise me. And now we move on to the marquee event, the main event, Sean Strickland and Duplessis. Strickland got off to a real good start in round 1, getting that jab going early and often, really kind of setting the tone for what he wants to do in the fight and checking all of Duplessis' leg attacks. Duplessis did hit a very nice double leg, but Strickland was able to get right back up. It was taken down again, but again, popped right back up to his feet. Duplessis had thrown some really nice head kicks in this. No setup behind them, just kind of threw them naked. But it was fast and powerful, but it didn't seem to faze Strickland at all. And Strickland finished the round with another great jab and a solid right hand. But the second round, Duplessis started finding his way and his groove, cutting Strickland over the right eye. But Strickland still staying behind his jab and staying calm. Duplessis landed another takedown off a single leg. But again, Strickland hit a beautiful switch and remained on his feet. And the end of the round, you can see that Duplessis' left eye is almost completely swollen shut. And that is going to be a real problem as the fight goes on, if Strickland can keep attacking that and throwing those hard jabs and really targeting that area. Third round, close round to score. Strickland still landing his jab, but he stopped with those teep kicks and inside leg kicks, which were keeping Duplessis at bay a little bit, in my opinion, while Duplessis is still mixing up his strikes, going to the body, going to the head, using kicks, punches, elbows, spinning back fists. But again, Strickland seems unfazed by any of Duplessis' attacks, and Strickland's shots do seem to have a bit more pop behind them, and are really busting up Duplessis quite bad. I mean, the swelling on his face at this point is not looking too nice, while Strickland is still looking quite fresh in that state. I did find it quite funny that after every round, Duplessis' corner kept telling him that Strickland is tired, which was a bit odd because the guy doesn't even sit down between rounds and is breathing like he's just going for a walk in the park. Yeah, bit odd, that one. But obviously they're probably just trying to get into their fighter's head that he should be pushing it and really kind of going for it. The fourth round was a huge one for Duplessis. He landed several big right hands, cutting Strickland's left eye really bad, and that clearly bothered Strickland. With the blood getting into his eye, he was wiping at it, pawing at it, which is quite natural to do. Duplessis also landed some really nice takedowns in that round and wasn't really able to hold Strickland down for a period of time, but those all add up and they do drain on you a little bit. They're going to drain on your arms, they're going to drain on your gas tank, they're going to drain on your legs. Strickland did finish the round with a strong 1-2, but this was a clear round for Duplessis. And I mean, at best right now for Strickland, it's going to be 2-2 going into the fifth, or most likely 3-1 Duplessis going into that final round. I can't see a judge having Strickland 3-1 up at this point. It'd be very hard to judge it that way. But, this is MMA scoring, and it's not the worst decision that I think would have been called out. Final round was really good for Strickland. He had a really great round, landing his jab and right hand much more than the previous round. Duplessis landed good strikes of his own, but that was a big fifth round for the champion. And potentially, depending on how the judges scored it, if they did have it 2-2 going into that fifth round, that would swing the fight in his favor. But again, it would all depend on how the judges looked at rounds 2 through 4. And this did end up going to the judges, and it was a split decision, 48-47 times 2 for DDP and 48-47 by one judge for Sean Strickland. No complaints from me on this one. Really great fight, really close fight, and would not surprise me if we saw these two go at it again in the future. It's not going to be an immediate rematch. I cannot see that happening, but in his post-fight interview, Duplessis did say that he would like to fight Adesanya, which would be incredible, and I think everyone would love to see that. And it's another fight that they could potentially look at putting on that June card in Saudi Arabia. I think that would be massive, and it's the one that the Saudis, I think, would definitely love to have there as well. Khamzat Chimaev was tweeting that he would see Duplessis at UFC 300, which I find very strange because I still don't think Khamzat's allowed in the country. So unless he's going to see him on TV at UFC 300, I don't know what the point in that tweet was. But yeah, really good card. Unfortunate night for the Canadian men. Great night for the Canadian females. And yeah, another card down in the books. And if you listen to my preview show when I went through my picks, I did advise, please do not take any of my betting advice because it's most likely going to be terribly wrong. I have very bad luck with these kind of things, as I took Sean Strickland, Mayra Bueno Silva, Mike Malott, and Arnold Allen 0-4. So not great. And if I was putting money down on this, I would have lost it all. I did actually have Chris Curtis and Marc-Andre Barriault go in the distance, so at least that's a little bit of a positive, I guess. I'll take whatever I can get at this point. And that's it for another episode of The Fight Corner. Thank you all again for tuning in. It really means a lot to me. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And the next UFC card is not until February 4th. Roman Dolidze and Nasruddin Imavov. We'll be doing a show this week, just breaking down some of those fights. We might go a bit more in-depth in those just because we have a bit more time to do some research. We'll also be hitting you up with a news show at some point this week as well. So please don't forget to also hit that little bell for notifications so you always get up-to-date information on when we're uploading and when we have a new video out. But again, thank you guys all so much for tuning in. It means a lot to me, and I can't wait to do this again. Peace.